Hi there, and welcome to another edition of Israel Explained, the Hassan Nasrallah has been assassinated edition. Israel has assassinated many terrorists over the years. Some would say too many, but this is easily the most important one yet. Nasrallah is the face since 1992 of the strongest terrorist organization that Israel has ever faced against, and someone who had a very important stature, not only in the region, but also in Israeli society, in Lebanon, one of the most important people in the Middle East. Now, let's talk about how this attack was planned, what it means, and all that good stuff. So, Israel has wanted to kill Nasrallah for many years, but there's been a status quo that it's preserved. Um, Hezbollah wouldn't shoot its rockets deep into Israel, its many long range rockets, and Israel would avoid killing some of the more high profile targets in Hezbollah, including, of course, Nasrallah, and bombing Beirut, at least massively, so on and so forth. Recently, after 11 months of relentless, though controlled, Hezbollah bombing of northern Israel, Israel has released all the stops. So, about 10 years ago, when the sort of underground bunker HQ that Nasrallah was killed in was created, Israel started to hatch a plan on how to kill him. Israel has blueprints of the HQ, former HQ, I should say, and had a very good idea on how to destroy it. There were two things stopping it from doing so up until now. One was political developments. When does Israel feel like it's in its interests to kill Nasrallah? Until now, it's not clear that had ever happened. And second, you had to have information that Nasrallah was located in the bunker, preferably with as many of his leaders as possible. And that's what happened. So on Monday in this week, the IDF and Mossad placed this proposal on the desk of the prime minister. On Wednesday, it was placed before the cabinet. The cabinet approved it. In the meantime, you might remember Israel was talking to the US and France about a ceasefire, and it meant it. Israel wasn't sure that it could pull off the assassination of Nasrallah, and even if it could, it was hoping maybe it could do those talks after the assassination from a position of strength, which still might happen. Now, there's been a lot of talk about when the US was informed. Biden was informed at the very last minute that this attack was coming. Netanyahu was concerned, probably correctly, that he would block the attack. Once it was already on the way, which is when he was informed, he basically had to give his blessing, and he did. So Friday at 6:20 in the evening, the bombs hit the target, which was the Hezbollah HQ in the Dakhia, that's a suburb in southern Beirut, which is Shiite and pro-Hezbollah, and the attack went completely according to plan. Uh, the Squadron 69, which is a reservist mostly squadron, flew 10 15I planes, F-15I planes. The I represents the modifications that Israel makes to those planes. They flew to the Mediterranean and then into Lebanon from the west. 83 bombs were dropped on the headquarters, each one weighing a ton, with a ton of explosives. Some of them were bunker busters, some of them weren't. The exact configuration of bombs and their placement had been planned long in advance to bring about the entire collapse of the HQ, which worked very well. It took 16 hours to confirm his death. First, the IDF confirmed Nasrallah's death, then Hezbollah did, although very quickly, sources in the IDF said they were pretty sure he was dead because while they couldn't find his body, they were pretty sure that he was there and that no one had survived the attack who was there. Now, as you remember, this attack comes after the dramatic Beeper attack, which took out about 5,000 Hamas, Hezbollah terrorists and incapacitated the chain of command within the operation. Now the entire head of the operation has been decapitated. So Hezbollah is in absolutely terrible shape. It's not clear how well it's functioning. And in general, even before this, its ability to fire at Israel when Israel had changed the entire equation in the region had been very minimal. They seem to have been emasculated. They seem to have been revealed to be a lot weaker than we thought. Um, but Hezbollah's not gone yet. That's a bit of an exaggeration that people are acting as if Hezbollah is no longer a factor. They are. They have a new head, or someone who's expected to be their head in the long term. Someone was appointed interim and has already been killed by Israel. But this individual, Hashim Safi al-Din, is being protected. He's supposed to be the guy who takes over. He's, Hezbollah royalty. He's Nasrallah's cousin. And he's Qasem Soleimani's son-in-law. That's the famous Iranian general who organized Hezbollah and was assassinated by the United States in the past. He doesn't have any military background or understanding of strategic issues. He was always involved in political issues. That's a good thing for Israel. A lot of their experience, their military experience, is now gone due to the recent Israeli operations. And Israel has shown no sign of letting up after that assassination. It warned that the any hostile plane trying to land in the Beirut International Airport will be shot down. That's part of an effort to stop arms from coming into Lebanon. A lot of it has been coming in through the airport. Some of the other arms have been coming in through the Bekaa Valley, through truck convoys and the like. Israel's been bombing those for a long time. So Israel really doesn't want Hezbollah to have the ability to recover from this attack. It's also going to be working much more intensely on Lebanese villages close to the border, where Hezbollah has maintained a lot of its capabilities because the IDF hasn't been focusing there, even though that's a very dangerous element. So a lot of what Hezbollah has been destroyed, and it's in disarray, but it has one weapon that probably hasn't been harmed all that much, and that is the tunnels. The tunnels that Hezbollah has located throughout southern Lebanon, and some going well into the north, are, according to reports, ones that would put Hamas to shame. And we've seen from Gaza how difficult it can be to deal with those tunnels. And that's why there is hesitation in the IDF to actually go into Lebanon, and a hope to continue to use Israel's improved intelligence and Israel's excellent Air Force targeting capabilities to continue weakening Hamas and reach some kind of arrangement that way. Because once Israel goes in, it could be a very different story due to those tunnels. Not that Israel can't defeat the tunnels, it probably can, but at what cost? How many soldiers would win? And then that could start to rebuild Iranian capabilities, reputation, all the things that Israel has worked very hard to remove. But the good side for Israel is that Hezbollah's rocket capabilities seem to have been severely diminished, and that means that Israel has a lot more freedom to operate. It also means that if Israel is going to be punished for what it's done, it's not going to be by Hezbollah. At least doesn't look like Hezbollah can do it. It would have to be Iran. But it's not even clear if Iran can. Remember, on April 14th, Iran tried to launch missiles at Israel. The operation was a terrible failure. And while it's possible they could launch a better missile operation and try to saturate Israel, we don't know how possible that is, how many capabilities they have to do that. I think one of the reasons we've seen so much restraint from Iran is that they have one primal fear. Their primal fear is to be revealed as a paper tiger, to be revealed as impotent, something that they would never recover from in the Middle East. You can recover from a lot of things, but not from that. What if Iran used all the measures at its disposal and barely managed to damage Israel? And then Israel responded much more harshly and damaged Iran very seriously, as we know that it can. Then what? Then what becomes of Iran's reputation in the region? Remember, Iran's in a very delicate position. They punch way above their weight in the Middle East. There aren't that many Sunnis in the Middle East. The vast majority of people, there aren't that many Shiites in the Middle East, I should say. The vast majority of people are Sunnis. And through their military capabilities and their reputation for being able to win wars, notably from when they got Israel to withdraw from Lebanon, notably from when Syria won the civil war in Lebanon, notably from when Saudi Arabia wasn't able to beat them in Yemen, that's been where a lot of their power comes from. But if their military power is revealed as an illusion, the Sunnis may work much more seriously together against them. So this is a very big problem for them if they're revealed to be impotent. And they're terrified to attack Israel, not so much because of the response, but because of what it might reveal about the limits of their capabilities. And that's why I'm not so sure they're going to even try to punish Israel because they're afraid of what that will mean. And of course, they know what Israel will do to them. And this raises a lot of questions for Iran. Iran is a poor country in many ways. They've been investing so much of their money in their military capabilities and in the military capabilities of Hezbollah and Hamas. They have a doctrine of surrounding Israel by proxy organizations that is basically known there as the Qasem Soleimani doctrine, because he's the one who did it. And now that Hezbollah and Hamas are proving to be unable to threaten Israel the way that they were expected to, a lot of people in Iran will be saying this was a waste of money and we should be looking at our priorities more carefully. And that's especially a prescient question because Iran has a reformist president, Masoud Pezeshkian, and he's been talking about moving towards some kind of detente with the West. And he's been a critic of the investment in Hezbollah and Hamas, at least to some extent. There's a good chance he uses this defeat of Hezbollah and the impotence of the whole Qasem Soleimani doctrine, at least the way it seems now, to push for a change, to push for investment elsewhere, and also to push for a deal with the West on nuclear weapons and maybe a wider rapprochement. So that's something to look for. That would actually be a strategic victory for Israel if Iran means it, if it can get less investment in the terrorist organization surrounding it, not because Iran or the Iranian regime is any better than it used to be, but because they realize that that's not working. So that's a very hopeful direction that we're looking at. And Israel is trying to get Biden on board with its wider strategy of weakening the Shiite coalition. The message sent to Biden after the attack, according to Channel 12, read in the following way, quote, "We could have missed an opportunity here. We didn't tell you because we didn't want you to be responsible for knowing about the operation. This is a move against the entire Shiite coalition," end quote. And then regarding the ceasefire, the message also said, quote, "We're willing to talk about a ceasefire as long as the talks continue while the firing continues." So what Israel wants to do, and this is certainly smart, it's certainly proving itself, is to continue to punish Hezbollah, to continue to weaken it so that it gets the leverage in the talks. And as much as the more it weakens Hezbollah's leverage, it also weakens Hamas's leverage. So there is a tie here between the two. And right now, Israel is likely to get better terms than it was a couple of weeks ago. And that's why it's important not to go into Lebanon, in my opinion, and change that balance, because that could mean that Israel loses its upper hand. Biden, though he was concerned about the escalation, he gave a statement that was completely supportive of Israel. He said, quote, "Hassan Nasrallah and the terrorist group he led, Hezbollah, were responsible for killing hundreds of Americans over a 4-decade reign of terror. His death from an Israeli airstrike is a measure of justice for his many victims," end quote. And that's good. Ultimately, whatever critiques Biden has against how Israel's handling matters in Lebanon and with Hezbollah, he's always in the end supported it. It's been very different from Gaza, where it's been much more of a unclear policy because there's been more concern about civilians and a day after plan and that sort of thing. Now, there's an entire battle in Israel domestically right now over who gets the credit, whether Netanyahu or the IDF get the credit. I don't want to get too much into that. Everyone knows where my sympathies lie, but I don't want to get into that too much. But here are some of the facts of what we know about who was for and against the attack. There were people who were actually against the attack, most notably Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who twice said he was against the attack. Netanyahu was definitely for the attack, but he wanted it to be delayed until after his talk in the UN. It was the IDF and Gantz who convinced him to do it while he was there, mostly because the intelligence opportunity that had come up would be wasted by the time he left for the UN. So, as usual, we have that kind of posturing: who gets the credit, who doesn't. Everyone deserves credit here. The four big people who deserve credit are, of course, the Prime Minister Netanyahu, Defense Minister Gallant, Herzi Halevi, the IDF Chief of Staff, and, of course, the head of the Mossad, Dedi Barnea. One of the nicest things that have come out of this in terms of domestic politics is that in a rare moment of unity, everyone in the cabinet, when they met, praised Chief of Staff Halevi, who has been a punching bag for many in the coalition. And I think it's time that we all gave this man credit. He has a tremendous amount of responsibility for October 7th. So does everyone else that I mentioned. Not so much Dedi Barnea from the Mossad, by the way, but more Ronen Bar from the Shabak, because the Shabak is responsible for Gaza. But since then, Halevi has learned so many lessons, had so many successes for the IDF, often fighting in very difficult conditions, especially in Gaza, planning these incredible operations against Hezbollah. I think it's fair to say that when Halevi resigns, he has saved his reputation. He has proven himself to be a great chief of staff, and his legacy, I believe, especially after this attack, is secure. And I think we all we all should be giving him the credit that he deserves. But also Gallant, also Netanyahu. This was an incredible success. And usually, when Israel has an operation, I say this isn't a strategic success, it's a tactical success. This one isn't a strategic success yet, but it does have strategic implications and could be leveraged into a strategic success. If this changes the Iranian calculus, if this changes Hezbollah's calculus, if this changes Hamas's calculus, this will be a strategic success. And we're close to that. This is a moment of some optimism for Israel. It has to be very careful with its next step, but it has the upper hand. And this translates also to Gaza. It's important to say. I'll be following this closely, of course, and reporting when things happen. I do have a couple of questions from my last episode from Israel. As you can see, I'm back in LA. At the time, I was talking about the potential replacement of Yoav Gallant with Gideon Sa'ar as defense minister, which last I heard a few days ago was still on. This operation might have changed that. But anyway, the questions were related to that, or the first question was related to that. One, why is the Israeli political class so shielded against the political protests against it? And, when I was in Israel, I participated in the protests. I went to 3 different protests, tried to get sort of idea of the movement. The movement had all kinds of social forces behind it, but because it's in Tel Aviv, because a lot of the people in it are Tel Avivi, Ashkenazi, relatively affluent, it's labeled as representing a certain part of the people, a certain elite. And a little bit like the rhetoric we have in the United States with the real America versus coastal elites, etc., uh, sometimes people on the right can dismiss it on those grounds, even though, according to many of the polls, most Israelis agree with the protests to some extent. It's shown that way. And so that makes it easy to ignore. Another element that makes it easy to ignore is because the way coalition politics are built, no matter what the rest of the public thinks, as long as the coalition itself hasn't lost faith in the government, or at least isn't willing to dismantle it, the government is safe. So that's isolated them from it quite a bit. That was a question from Motor 15. Gelbart asks, what do you think of Israel considering taking over food distribution from Hamas in Gaza? So I've been for this from the very beginning, for two reasons. Reason number one, well, three reasons. Reason number one, the aid helps Hamas. There's been different studies about this. Last one I saw said that Hamas managed to distribute 80% of the aid, and then they take the proceeds from it and the material that they want to support their continued fight against the IDF. Second reason, it helps Hamas with the governance, not just with their ability to fight. I've said for a long time that Israel can't win until they replace Hamas as a government. The distribution of aid is arguably the most important instrument of government right now during this crisis. And we're letting Hamas do that. Israel's letting Hamas do that. That keeps them in power. Third, Hamas doesn't deliver the aid responsibly. It keeps a lot of it for itself, and that means it's not getting to the people who need it the most. So even for humanitarian reasons, it's good for Israel to deliver it. Ideally, Israel would provide the protection. International organizations would actually hand it out, because I think they would have better relations with the locals than the IDF, and that would be the best solution for the three problems. It would place Israeli soldiers at risk, but you can't win a war without placing soldiers at risk. Okay, so that's the end of this episode. If you like what I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon at Shael Media. I'm working on the next episode of my podcast, History of the Land of Israel podcast. I'll update you as that moves along, and I'll see you here next time something interesting happens, which will be very, very soon.